bless each of you. Thank you so much for joining us for our weekly Bible study. We are yet and excited and about what God is doing and how He's doing it here at United. And we are still on the series on faith because I believe that it's going to take faith for us to be able to accomplish the things that God has for us, even the assignment that He has upon our lives. Sunday, of course, Sunday before we started off talking about faith to finish, and then this Sunday we talked about faith to overcome. Well, tonight I want to continue to talk about faith, and I want to talk about steadfast faith. Steadfast faith. Our text is going to come from St. James 12 and 4. James 12 and 4. And it says, I'm sorry, it's James 1, 2 through 4. James 1, 2 through 4. It said, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produce persevere. Let persevering finish its work, so that you may be matured and complete, not liking anything. Not liking anything. Steadfast faith. First of all, we got to understand that steadfast faith is when we stay focused on the task that we've been given. So, number one, understanding steadfast faith. So, in order to understand what steadfast faith is, then we have to understand uh, what is steadfast faith. Steadfast faith, a firm, unanswering belief, unwavering belief, a firm, unwavering belief in God despite life unpredictable. It's a unwavering belief in God, despite life unpredictable situation. Whatever the unpredictable situation is, we must be firm in our faith. It's not merely believing in God when things are going well, but it's holding on when everything seems to be falling apart. Steadfast faith. And I believe in this season, in this time, we must have steadfast faith. Steadfast faith. That word steadfast in the Greek means to endure. It means to be patient, endure or have patience. I want you to think of a tree during a storm. Regular faith may believe that the storm will pass, but steadfast faith has deep roots that holding the tree upright when the wind rage. How often do we see uh, storms come through, or even storms in our lives? And what we got to learn how to do is we got to learn how to hold fast, hold steady, hold our upright, even in the midst of the storm. So understanding steadfast will allow us to have steadfast faith. Steadfast faith. So when we look at it, we can say faith versus steadfast faith. Faith believes in God's promise. Listen at this. Faith believes in God's promises. Steadfast faith is holding to those promises over time, whether it's through trial, pain, or an unanswered question. Let me say that again. Faith, believing in God's promise, but steadfast faith is holding on to those promises over time, even when trials, pain, and unanswered questions seem to appear. Whenever that seems to appear. So here's the thing, that tree going through a storm is just like regular faith, but staying upright is steadfast faith. That steadfast faith that even when it went through all of the wind, no matter how many miles per hour that wind were, it still stood upright. It still stayed in position. And what we got to understand, it's all right to have faith, and that's believing God's promises, but we got to have steadfast faith that even when the storms come, we're still holding on to those promises. Understanding steadfast faith. And when you understand steadfast faith, then you understand the kind of faith that you have. Number two, there's a purpose of testing faith. You got to understand, and I stated this on Sunday as well, but you got to understand that there are tests that we go through, and those tests that we go through, those trials that we go through, they're here to make us, to mature us, to build us, to make us better than we were before the test. So the purpose of testing faith is for the trials, and trials are not punishment. And I've said this often, that we ought to welcome trials because trials builds us. And you got to understand that trials are not punishment. Trials are the tools in God's hand for shaping our character. You got to know that. These are the tools that God used to shape us, to make us better, to make us endure, to make us to be more matured. These are the trials. So we ought to be able to welcome trials and not frown at them because we know that there are benefits in the trials we go through. Now, one of the things that I stated on Sunday is I don't shun the trials or the tribulations that I go through, but I do ask God, what is it? What's the purpose of this? Why do you have me going through this? Because I understand that anytime He allows me to go through a storm, there's a purpose behind that storm. And because there's a purpose, I want to make sure that I'm in position that while I'm going through this storm, I can go through with a smile on my face, a praise on my lip, with confidence, knowing that after I've endured this trial, I'm going to be better. And if we take on that attitude, then when the trials come, we would understand that it's there to make us. You see, God is more interested in who you're becoming than what you're achieving. He's more interested in who you are becoming than what you're trying to achieve. And that's why I constantly tell people that I'm in the becoming business. I'm trying to get us in position so that we can always become who God designed for us to be. You got to understand that you weren't born at the place where God wanted you. He gave us an opportunity to be able to grow. There's a process. Becoming is a process. I don't care how much you achieve. God is not interested in what you're achieving. He's interested in who you are becoming. So our faith must be tested. And our faith is tested so that we can grow. I said this on Sunday, that faith is like a muscle. Just as muscles grows under resistance, so does faith. Faith is developed under pressure. I know that sometimes when you're going through and things seem like it's too difficult for you, you got to realize that God is only developing your faith because of the pressure that you're under. It's like a muscle. The more pressure you got, the more resistant you have, the more stronger you become. So you got to also look at it in this fashion. God is not just trying you for right now. The test that you're going through is not necessarily for the present. But sometimes God will allow a trial to come our way so that He can prepare us for what's ahead. for who we becoming, for the next level that he's taken us to. So we should never shun our trials, because without challenge, we remain spiritually immature. So we have to be challenged. There's got to be a challenge in our life. The scripture says in 1 Peter 1, 6 and 7, though now for a little while you may have to suffer grief. These have come so that the proven genuine of your faith may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. In other words, what you're going through now is not for now. It's for the present, for the future. It's for what's getting ready to happen. So you might be suffering now, but your suffering should prove your genuine faith. It should prove who you really are, so that you can have a result that when this test is over, when this trial is over, you have a praise and you can give God glory and you can honor him for who he is. So I want you to understand that when you understand the steadfast faith, and then you understand the purpose of your testing of your faith, then there's the characteristic of a steadfast believer. The characteristics of a steadfast believer. A steadfast believer endures through adversary. They don't quit when things get difficult. And the truth of the matter is, I'm seeing this too often among believers. And what I'm concluding is that they are believers, but not steadfast believers. Because steadfast believers understand that their faith is what caused them to endure. In other words, they depend on what they know work for them. I stated this on Sunday as well, that your faith goes before you. It see it before it happened. And that's why we can stand steadfast on faith, because faith is working on my behalf. And because it's working on my behalf, I know it's going to work for me. It's going to work for me. So I have to have the characteristic of a steadfast believer. I got to endure through adversary. I got to have a mind that I'm not going to quit when it gets difficult. Not only do steadfast believers have endurance, but they trust without answers. In other words, I don't know what the results of this gonna be, but I'm trusting God that it's gonna work in my favor. They gotta continue to believe even without full understanding. I don't fully understand what's happening, but I'm still trusting God. And the reason why I'm still trusting God is because I've seen what he can do. And I've seen him bring me out of some things that are a whole lot more difficult than this. I've seen him develop me when I didn't know how to get developed. I'm trusting him without an answer. The other thing of a steadfast believer, the characteristic is there's joy in the trial. So let me ask you a question. How do I turn my trials into joy? How do I be joyful in the midst of a trial? Not because of pain, but because of the purpose. I understand the purpose of why I'm going through. Now that I know that this faith, this steadfast faith that I have, is developing me. Now that I know I can depend on God in spite of my difficult time. Now that I know that I'm trusting him without an answer, then I can have joy in the midst of my trial. Not only that, as a steadfast believer, I got to learn how to focus on eternal things. Too often we want temporary things, and we focus on this temporary thing that's happening. Let me just throw this right here in. Trump as a president is just temporary. So while we focus so much on what's happening, all of his decisions that he's making is not eternal. It's just temporary. Y'all don't want to help me in here. And so what I'm saying is we have to start focusing on eternal things rather than temporary things. We got to learn how to value character over comfort. We got to get to the point where we know who we are, to the point where we stay steadfast in who we are. Are y'all still here? So we got to have the characteristics of a steadfast believer. And then number 4, there are biblical examples of steadfast faith. When we begin to look at these biblical characters that stood when they could have quit, when they could have justified their quitting, they stood. Y'all remember Job? Job learned how to worship even in his loss. Lost everything, but he had faith. He still had faith in God. How do you still have faith when you lost your children? How do you still have faith when you lost everything that you worked for? He stood steadfast. He was steadfast. In other words, he understood purpose. In other words, he depended more on God than the things. And that right there ought to be an example for all of us. We should not get so caught up on things that we lose focus on God. Because when you have God, like Job lost everything, but the Bible said God gave him double for everything that he lost. In other words, because of his faith and him being steadfast in his faith, it produced more than he had before. This is what Job said. Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him. Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him. I'm going to be steadfast. I don't understand this process that he got me in right now, but I'm going to still stay steadfast. I still believe. My faith's still working for me. I'm still going to have joy in this trial. I'm still going to trust him, but although I don't have an answer for it, I don't have an answer why you take all of my children at the same time. I don't have an answer why you take away everything that I worked so hard for. I don't understand, but I have chosen to endure through every adversary. I have chosen to keep going even in the midst of difficult times. Job says, I'm going to have faith that I can worship even in my loss. And then there was Abraham. Abraham had faith that waits. Job had faith that worshiped in loss. But Abraham had faith that waits. Listen at this. God gave him a promise that he was going to have a son, but it took 25 years for the promise to come to pass. 25 years before he could see Isaac, after the promise had given. You know, I stated to you some time ago that God don't go through a process. Whenever he speaks it, it happened then. We go through the process to see the manifestation. But when God speaks it, it's already done. In other words, he start at the end and come to the beginning, where we start at the beginning and go to the end. And that's why we can keep trusting him, because he's already worked it out. But listen at what he said. He said, he did not waver through unbelief regarding the promise of God. How do God give you a promise and then wait 25 years? But here it is. Abraham said, I didn't waver. I didn't doubt God. I didn't give up on God. I didn't quit on God, all because I know what God can do. In other words, this ain't the first promise that he made to me. This ain't the first time that he came through for me. And because it's not the first time, I'm still steadfast in my faith. Abraham had faith that wait. And then there's Paul. Paul had faith that endured suffering. He had faith that endured suffering. Listen at Paul here. Paul was in prison. He was beaten. He was shipwrecked. He was beaten. He was in prison. He was shipwrecked. Paul was beaten, thrown in prison, and shipwrecked. Yet he say, "I fought the good fight. I finished my race, and I've kept the faith." He's been beaten. He's been imprisoned. He's been shipwrecked. But listen at this enduring faith. Listen at this faith that endured suffering. He said, "I fought a good fight. I finished my race." And here's the key: I kept the faith. In other words, he said, in the midst of my fight, I gave it my best. And I finished what I started. And in the midst of me fighting and finishing, I kept the faith. I didn't waver. Let me see, can I put it like this? He said, in my fight, I did good. In my race, I didn't give up. I didn't quit. I finished. And he said, in the midst of all of that, I stayed steadfast in my faith. Paul had faith that endured suffering. Then there's Jesus. Jesus, the ultimate model of steadfast faith. Here's what he did. He endured the cross despite the shame for the joy that was set before him. He did not come down off the cross. He didn't destroy the ones that put him on the cross. Y'all got me. But he hung there because he had a purpose. Even in the midst of humiliated, he still stayed there despite the shame, because he understood that there was going to be joy that was going to be set before him. These are the biblical examples of the men that stood steadfast in their faith. But here's the deal: after you stand, after you understand the purpose of the testing, and after you understand steadfast faith, then there is a result of steadfast faith. And the result of steadfast faith is that now I'm better. In other words, I'm more spiritual mature. Because I understand that in James 1:4, he said that ye may be mature and complete. Because I stayed steadfast, I'm spiritual matured now. I can complete some work. See, immature people don't finish. Immature people quit on the way. They don't stay committed. Their character is not representable to be used. And so what I'm saying is, when we become spiritual matured, we're able to stand. Not only that, steadfast faith gives you the result of Christ-like character. The Bible says in Romans 5:3-5, suffering, persevere, character, and hope. Listen at this. Suffering equals persevering. Persevering equals character, and character equals hope. Ah, let me say it like this. Suffering produce persevering. Persevering produce character. And character produce hope. That's Christ-like character. This is the result of not quitting, not throwing in the towel, not stopping in the midst of difficult time. But not only does it matures us, not only does it produce a Christ-like character, but it produces powerful witness. A believer who holds firm, glorify God, and encourage others. When you're steadfast, you got something to talk about. Somebody missed it. When you're steadfast in your faith and you came through some things, then you can glorify God, but you also can be a witness to others about what God is capable of doing. I can encourage somebody and tell them, look, just hold on, baby. Hold on just a little while. There are some results that you're going to be very, very excited and proud of. Number four, eternal reward. Eternal reward. James 1 and 12 said, blessed is the one who preserves under trial. Who's preserved under trial. Here's my last point. Well, actually, I got two more. Try to make it in. I got about 5 minutes. So let me make it. Here's the deal. After we have the results of steadfast, then there's developing steadfast faith. How do I develop steadfast faith? I know the results of it. I understand the examples that others did. I understand the character of a steadfast believers. I understand the purpose of the testing of faith, and I understand steadfast faith itself. So how do I develop steadfast faith? Number one, you got to study the word. Psalms 119 and 105 said, the word strengthens our inner man. So we got to study the word. If we're going to become strong, if we're going to be developed, we gotta study the word of God. Number two, you got to practice daily surrendering. You know, one of the things that I've discovered as a believer is that we have too many folks that don't know how to surrender. You got to practice on this daily of surrendering, because faith grows when we lay down control. Let me say it again. Faith grows when we lay down control. Too often we want too many folks want to be in control. And a lot of them want to be in control, and they don't understand what it means to be in control. So faith grows when we lay it down. Number three, you got to stay in prayer, because prayer aligns our heart with God's will. Stay in prayer, because prayer aligns our heart with God's will. And number four, you got to remember his faithfulness. You got to know what God has done for you. And the truth is, he's been faithful to us. How often do we forget whether it's God or man that's been faithful to you? Somebody that's been faithful to you, you just ignore that and you take that for granted. A lot of times we take God's faithfulness for granted. See, when you journal answer prayers, what happened is it builds confidence. Okay, let me put it like this. When you write down when God answered your prayer, it builds your confidence. Sometimes, because maybe our age or because we have so much going on, sometimes you got to write some stuff down so that you can go back and read it and remember what God has done or what had happened in your life. And number four, number five, you got to surround yourself with the faithful. Surround yourself. I don't want to be around nobody always talking negative, always telling me what I can't do. Always, they got something negative to say. I'm going to surround myself with somebody that's being faithful. I'm going to surround myself with somebody that love going to church and not just hit and miss. I'm going to surround myself with somebody that love God and love for God to strengthen them, love for God to feed them. I'm gonna surround myself with somebody that has a like mind. Because here's what I've discovered: fellowship and testimony strengthen faith. So I want to be around somebody that knows how to testify. In other words, they've been through a test. If you're surrounding yourself with somebody that's been through a test, they understand your testimony. But if they ain't never been through a test, they can't get with your testimony. Because only those of us that are going through tests have a testimony. So you got to surround yourself with somebody that's faithful. And number 6, you got to learn how to obey even when it's hard. See, faith is active trust. Let me say that again. Faith is active trust. Obedient, concrete belief. Let me say it again. Faith is active trust. Obedient, concrete belief. How many of you know once concrete set up, it's hard to break? So when you obey, you concrete your belief. Now let's talk about some things that you need to practice. If you're married, you got to stay faithful when it's hard to love, even when you don't understand your spouse. You got to stay faithful. Even when folks telling you, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't take that. I wouldn't. Stay faithful. Number 2, in your health, you got to trust God's plan, even when your healing is delayed. You got to know that God is a healer. Don't go on what somebody else is saying. Know that God is a healer. And when you know God is a healer, don't let nobody shake your faith. Stay obedient. Build that concrete wall up. And here it is in finance. Tithe and giving. You got to learn how to tithe, and you got to learn how to give when it don't even make sense. In other words, I'm trusting God when it don't even make sense. Are y'all here? And then you got to have a purpose. See, in purpose, you wait patiently when God's promise seemed delayed. He's giving you a promise. And even when the promise seemed delayed, you still got to wait patiently. Can y'all just recall a season when your faith was severely tested? Think about it now. Can you remember when your faith was severely tested? Severely tested. What are some ways we can be prepared for our test and our trial? Think about it. Who you know that are steadfast in their faith? One of the key things is we got to stay steadfast. We got to develop our steadfast faith. We got to look for the results of our steadfast faith. We got to remember the biblical characters that have already paved the way for us. And we got to understand the purpose of the testing of our faith and what it does. And lastly, you got to understand steadfast faith. Now, I know I can't do it all tonight. So I'll come back with part two on Sunday. I wanted to teach some things, but Sunday I'm going to do it a little different, okay? But I do want y'all to understand the importance of steadfast faith. Well, to all of you all that are watching us by Facebook Live, I'm so grateful and thankful that you have joined us on tonight. It's always a joy, and we never take it for granted when you come join in and listen to what God is saying. I also want you to take the time out to share it with somebody. Share this message. If it's been a blessing to you, share it with somebody else. Also, I would like to invite those of you all that are watching to come and join us at one of our live service here in the house. We're here every Sunday at 9 a.m., 923 Ridge Road, Columbus, Mississippi. Except fourth Sunday. On fourth Sunday, of course, we're here at 8 o'clock. Every fourth Sunday, we're here at 8 o'clock. But every other Sunday, first, second, and third, we are here at 9 a.m., allowing God to do what he do. So I want to invite you to come and be a part of our ministry. God bless you, and may he forever keep you is our prayer. One of the other things that I want to share with you is that we're super excited this coming Sunday at 10 a.m. At the Charity Fairview Full Gospel Baptist Church. We will be celebrating our pastor's 44th anniversary. Amen. 44 years. And let me tell you something. He hadn't just been a preacher there, but he's had vision and he's kept the faith as well, because all you have to do is look around and see his work. How many of you know that if you stay in the faith, then others will be able to see your accomplishment? So we are super excited. You know, I get, and I'm often told this, that I get more excited about pastor's anniversary than I do my own, because I look and see how God then used him and where God then brought him. And it gives me excitement, because if God can do it for him, I know he can do it for us as well. So we are super excited about this Sunday at 10 a.m. as we celebrate Bishop McCarter's 44th anniversary. Once again, we thank God for you. Remember, united we stand, and with faith, all things are possible. Be blessed until next week.